evening, fellas. Ben back again. Well, the last few kilometers of the running in period, and I just wanted to touch on something very important that very few people know, very few people understand, and very few people take into account and respect. Running in is not something that I mean, this might come off as a little bit of a controversial topic. Running in or breaking in a brand new engine, especially an engine which is high on power, and no matter what the world says about these bikes, these 400cc 40 bhp motorcycles, that they aren't powerful enough, I mean, it's just a bunch of crap. These bikes are very, very powerful. For the weight, they're very powerful, and they're geared accordingly to manage that power. So what I'm trying to say is, if you do not know, if you haven't had enough experience with motorcycles, if you haven't moved from a 100cc to a 200cc, a 200 to a 250, 300, 350, and then to a 400, you would definitely, mark my words, you would definitely end up screwing your engines. This motorcycling business is just complete crap now. Very few people understand motorcycles. Most of them just think of this as another vehicle that they own, and then they start abusing it on day one. All the complaints that's coming out into the market on the new 450 is predominantly because of poor running in. If you run in your engines well, these bikes need not see the service centers even once. They can be taken care of, very well maintained by you. Ben is a living example. I have run in about 20 plus motorcycles, so I know what I'm talking about, and my motorcycles do perform really, really well in comparison to all my friends' motorcycles. These motorcycles are powerful, so if you have no experience, prior experience with smaller capacity motorcycles, and then you haven't really moved on you know, through the ladder, kindly refrain from running in this motorcycle. Give it to somebody who knows what they're doing, who have had enough experience with motorcycle breaking in, and give it to them. They'll do a very good job of breaking these engines in. What I do with running in is I go after my pistons and piston rings, the seal between the piston rings and the bore or the block. That's what I do. That's what I keep in mind the most. So what I do is I play with a variety of RPMs. I play with a variety of throttle inputs. I've had the bike for almost 11 days now, and I've been doing enough riding for each day. I've been doing these 20 to 30 to 50 kilometers of riding every day, and letting the bike cool down. Heating up, cooling down, heating up, cooling down. Gives for a fantastic honing process. The piston rings kind of nicely what can I call it, they create the right amount of tension between this process creates the right amount of tension between the piston rings and the bore walls. So you get for a much better seal if you take the bike across its RPM range. One thing that I want you to keep in mind is, so the initial running in period is 500 kilometers of not crossing the 4000 RPMs, and the rest I guess it's up till 2000 kilometers. You can push it till 6000 RPMs. And when that's the case, what I do is I keep the first 300 kilometers within the 4000 RPM belt, and then between 300 and 400 I start pushing a little more. I let the engine see slightly higher RPMs. That is, I shift at 4300 RPMs. I sometimes maybe push it to 5000 RPMs like that, and then the last few kilometers I might also take it till 6000 RPMs, depending on how I feel my engine is allowing me to rev it. I will never lug in this process. I will never once lug. Lugging is the biggest crime you could commit to setting in an engine. Never ever lug a brand new engine. You can be a little soft and careful with putting in a new part into the engine and kind of bedding it in, but breaking in a brand new engine, never ever lug. A little high on the RPMs once in a while, that's perfectly fine, that's totally all right, no big crime you commit. So you can do that, you can push it, no problems, all this is fine. Once you start moving towards the the 500 kilometer mark, you can start freeing it up a little bit. Yeah, so what was I saying? Never lug. Keep it at the right power band and ride. Once you go past the 350 kilometer mark, you can cruise between 4 and 5. That's what I have done. I've seen to it that my engine during the running in phase sees a wide variety of RPMs without really pushing it. So I would never take it to the 6000 RPM mark if I know that I'm starting to push the bike. I will not do it. Or if I've ridden the bike for a longer period of time. I would only do this when I know that my ride is going to be not more than 20-30 minutes and that I'm going to put the bike to rest. Only then I would end up doing these things. So more important is knowing what kind of distances are you going to do. So the first 200 or 300 kilometers can be a good amount of distance. Then the 100 kilometers or between the 300 and the 400 mark can be divided into a 50 kilometer to 50 kilometer distance. And then the last few kilometers can be nice sprints, nice quick acceleration bits without crossing the 6000 RPM mark. The 6000 RPM mark is the cutoff for you for the last 100 kilometers. Running in is not rocket science, but it's also not something that should be performed by people who don't really know what they're doing. And this is a level 2 motorcycle. It's definitely not a level 1, a beginner friendly motorcycle like that. Well, that particular motorcycle is not a level 1 motorcycle either. But if you were to have a stock 411 with a torquey engine, almost anybody can start learning how to ride on that. No big deal. It's not the power, it's the way the power is put out by the various gears, the transmission, the way the gearing is set, and the way the power is handled by the gearing. That's more important. So to put things in perspective, what you need to keep in mind when you run in a brand new bike, especially an engine which puts out 40 horses and has kind of tall gearing, you need to keep one thing in mind, and that one thing only. No matter what you do, never be on the higher gear at the lower RPM. Be at the right gear at the right RPM. That's what's more important. More important is to constantly feel power on your throttle. Sub 4000 RPMs till 500 kilometers, the manufacturer says. So do not exceed 4000 RPMs, but whatever you do in that range, see to it that you feel the power on your throttle. So what I'm trying to say is be at the right gear at the right RPM. Never be at the higher gear at a lower RPM, wherein you'll have to drop a gear to get back power. Very, very important. Keep that in mind. A highly torquey, easy motorcycle, no problems. An engine that has to manage its torque, an engine that kicks in post 2500, 2600 RPMs. You have to be very, very careful. So all you have is just that much, 2600 to 4000 RPMs of power. That's exactly where you should shift all the gears and keep the bike running at. So very, very, very tricky business. Give it to somebody who knows what they are doing. Let them run it for you, break in the engine for you. Then you post your 500, 600 kilometers, you take and start riding this motorcycle if you're new to motorcycling. Tip number 2, if the manufacturer says 4000 RPMs until 500 kilometers, what I have done all my life is I do the first 200, 300 kilometers within the 4,000, and then I slowly start pushing it. I slowly start taking it up, like 4,200, 4,500, and then I take it up, like I say, 4,700, 4,800, 5,000 RPMs, and then towards the end of the 500 kilometers, like when there's just 50 kilometers or something left, I might push it till 6,000, 6,500, 7,000 RPMs too. But these are all quick bursts. What I keep in mind is the first 200, 300 kilometers of constant, smooth, lots of throttle action, and doing that 200, 300 kilometers in one distance, in one go. And then after 300, 350 kilometers, doing the rest of it in bits, with a lot of stops, a lot of time for the engine to cool down, is because I'm starting to rev, and I'm starting to take things to higher RPMs. So if you're within the 4,000 RPM mark and you have been varying throttle, and you've got a long stretch, you've got about 500 kilometers to do it in one go, nothing like it, finished off. Of course, give a lot of breaks. I would say 500 kilometers under 4,000 RPMs. I would say some 4-5 breaks. That should do it. But if you're starting to push, and if you're starting to vary the RPMs, then I would say 20-30 kilometers, a break. 20-30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, a break. Nice break, some 10-20 minutes of break, so that the engine cools down again. This will create for a fantastic seal between the piston rings and the bore and the block walls, and that is what is going to give you max power. Max power is what you should be aiming for, not a sluggish, slow engine which doesn't respond well, and all that ticking noise, all that nonsense comes up is because you're not revving your engine really well. You're starting to lug. Well, if these bits of information helped, it helped. That's all there is to it. I don't really want to educate anybody on how to run in their motorcycles. People do know what they're doing, but people do know what they're doing, but there are very high chances of you screwing up a motorcycle like this, because it's tall gearing and a lot of power, and the power kicks in post a certain RPM. So there are things to keep in mind. That's all there is to it. I just needed to address those points. Keep in mind never to lug. If you take back something from this video, that should be never ever to lug a motorcycle like this. Well, this helped. It helped. I shall see you guys on another one. This is Ben signing out for now. Ciao.